welcome to today's episode of the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Want to increase your financial IQ with today's episode, which is a post-presidential election episode. Just happened a few days ago. Pretty amazing stuff. I asked my teammate and friend here at Elliott Wealth Management Services, Brett DiPasquale, to join me so we could just talk about our early reactions to the election results and the win posted by President Trump. He'll get a second term. This isn't meant to be overly political. There will be some of that if you're a listener. There's no way around it. But we wanted to talk a little bit about our initial reactions, mostly as it pertains to the markets and the economy. That was an awfully long windup. Brett, thanks for spending a few minutes with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Exciting times.
Yeah, I stayed up late watching the election. I did not turn in until almost 3 in the morning. How about you?
Yeah, same with me. I went to bed probably around 11 o'clock and then randomly woke up around the 2 a.m. hour to completely different news than I went to bed with.
That probably was a better way. You got a few hours of sleep compared to me. I want to say initially, the first thought I wanted to share with you, and I want to get your thoughts. I am pleased, and I think it's good for the country. And I also, by extension, mean the economy and the markets are pleased that it was a decisive win, that the country doesn't have to be drugged through the mud, waiting to see who the winner is over a series of days, court stuff, attorneys, things like that. I'm glad that it was a decisive election. Now, if you're listening to this and you wanted Vice President Harris to win, you may not like that answer. I get that. But generally, I think it's good for all involved that it was a decisive win. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I was thinking about the same thing. And even looking back through some of the past presidential elections, going back to even 2016, we had a decisive answer that night, be it was at still the same thing, 2 or 3 in the morning. We had it that night. And then looking at 2020, how drug out the entire process was, I think overall it's better for the country. It's better for everyone's sanity that hasn't lost all of their sanity already in the past year and a half, 2 years through this election process. That we know it's decisive, it's as clean as it could be, I guess you could say, and now we can move forward and see what kind of policy looks like going into 2025.
Yeah, I want to get to a little bit of policy thoughts, maybe towards the end of this. But one of the things we've shared with clients, and it's worth repeating, I think it's very important, is that there's very little historical occurrences where one person is elected and the markets and the economy in reaction fall apart in a significant way. And I think this is something I talk about a lot, having been in the business 30 years. I know you've been in the business for 17 or 18 years, is that oftentimes in today's modern, hyper politicized world, when someone's presidential candidate doesn't win, they can have the tendency to think that everything is going to fall apart. And our role is to inform people that that's unlikely. Now, it could happen. This time may be different. But there's really no historical incidents where one person was elected and everything goes haywire because that person was elected. That's a fair assessment of things, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And just kind of taking a look through the past couple months as we've prepared for the election season to come up, fielding a lot of questions from clients, both with concern on policy, also concern on emotion, which everyone's had a lot of. And we've really stayed pretty consistent on our overall thinking of how we're investing money, where we're looking to invest money. Everything stayed pretty consistent, and we've tried to stay very agnostic and not be emotional on any type of the decisions.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, we have an investment committee here at Elliott Wealth Management. You're on the committee, myself, and others. We haven't spent much time in these meetings talking about, well, maybe we'll do X if this person wins, or we'll do Y if that person wins, or we need to be worried about this. We've stuck to just the macroeconomic and market conditions, and I think that served us well and is likely to continue to do so. You One other point that I wanted to make, sorry, I lost my train of thought there, is what we've been telling clients, and we were together with some clients just the other night, is that the trend is your friend, I think, because the previous three new presidents, Barack Obama back in 2008's election, and then Trump in 2016's election, and then uh, President Biden getting elected in 2020, their first full year in office, all three individuals who were significantly different and had different policy prescriptions. The world was certainly different in all three instances. Their first full year in office, the markets, I'm talking about the stock market generically, had very successful years. And I kind of feel that there's a good chance, no promises, but a good chance that that trend can continue in 2025. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think the same. We're on the same page with that. I believe that we could still, and we're still in line for a potentially very, very good 2025. I think one of the things worth mentioning is too, with the amount of emotion out there, we're in kind of a completely different time than even we were back in 2020. And what I mean by that is everything has become so much more electronics based with trading on your phone, trading on your computer, and watching the election results, you can go on and see where people are betting and putting their physical money on who is going to win the election in real time. That's something new that we haven't experienced before and really gives you the real time data of what people are thinking rather than watching a mainstream media source of what their pollsters are saying, what their pundits are saying, and what their data shows. So it's a different sector of the market that even shows even more emotion, which is something that we have to take into consideration on an everyday basis, monitoring investment decisions. That makes sense.
Yeah, well said. The other thing that I wanted to share with listeners, a little coaching, is that in the early going, this is 1 week after the election, and whether you think the market and the economy are doing great because Trump was elected, or you think the market is doing terrible because Trump was elected, 1 week is not determinant of what we may or may not see over the course of a 4 year term. Of course, we would like to get off to a better start. It's always better to get off to a good start. But whether it's a good start or not a good start, it's really not determinant of what we might see in 2025, 2026, and so on. So I just want to provide that educational note for listeners. And then I wanted to ask you about what do you think you want to watch for as we go through the transition period? I think President Trump would get sworn in on, I believe it's January 21st, 2025, in terms of how things begin to play out in the early going between now and when he's inaugurated and the early days of his campaign economically. What do you want to look for? What do you think will be some hints as to how things might begin to play out? You have any thoughts?
I think going forward, especially through the holiday season coming up, we'll get a really good judge of what his new cabinet's going to look like, if he makes any other big decisions that look very different than they did back in 2016. Also, too, with the 24-hour news cycle, I'm sure that we'll get some good insight into what he's actually thinking, what his cabinet's thinking, and what kind of policy is going to be instated. But I think two of the big things that are on my mind are number one, tariffs. How will he institute them, and in what way will he assess them on other countries? And the second thing is we've talked a little bit about this to clients is the Trump tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire at the end of this year, at the end of 2025. I'm sorry. So it's towards the end of 2025. Hopefully, we get some signaling even before that of how he plans to extend those, transform those, and what's going to happen. So I think that'll be something really impactful to everyone.
Yeah, I think it was underrepresented in the dialogue in the election by both candidates, both parties, the media, the public square. But I do think that that'll be come into great focus early on, and that might surprise some people. But if you have that tax law expire, it essentially is a tax cut based on how things have been since 2017. Excuse me, a tax increase for most Americans if it goes back to how it was prior to 2017. Now, there were good parts of that tax law, bad parts. In some ways, it made things simpler. In other ways, it made estate planning easier. In other ways, it increased taxes on certain high net worth individuals. There's a whole matrix of good and bad in that. But we'll have to see what happens because I don't think the Trump administration is going to just let that lapse. So it'll have to be dealt with, and that'll be on the radar early on. I want to see what the early hints are as to how that's going to play out, just like you. You mentioned tariffs. I definitely want to see how that gets played out. Personally, I think, and we talked about this privately, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But if you're listening, I think that the tariffs will not materialize, but Trump will use that to get concessions from other countries, reducing their tariffs on importing American goods. And he'll call that a win because he'll have leveled the playing field and not had to impose the tariffs that he talked about because he didn't have to because they leveled the playing field. So that's my quick guess. You mentioned the cabinet. I agree with that. I had written that down. And then I think in terms of regulation, I believe that he does have somewhat of a mandate to reduce the role of government in everyone's lives. Now, it's not going to go away. We're not going to go back to how it was in 1980, but I'm curious to see what he does early on. There's been talk about what RFK Jr. might do if he was in a cabinet. There's been talk about Elon Musk doing some efficiency kind of things. I definitely want to have an eye towards what that might look like and how that might be received by the business community. Of course, we need regulations, but can we do a better job? My personal opinion as a citizen is yes, but can he pull it off? Because sometimes you get serious political headwinds trying to do that. So those are a couple of things I'm watching. Anything else you want to add to the mix?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing would be something that we've been watching for the past year, and that's the continued decline of interest rates. So, depending on what happens next year, over the next year, 2, 3 years, it'll be very interesting to see what happens to interest rates, mortgage rates, the housing market, and how all of those tie in together. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, good. So just to wrap up, um, I will say we coached listeners. Don't judge a lot on how the markets and the economy perform in the first week. It's not necessarily determinant of what will happen over the next 4 years. There's a lot to play out. We like the trend that the first year of the last couple of presidents have been good. So we find that to be encouraging. It may not happen this time. We even may change our opinion. But right now, we find comfort in that, and it's a cause for optimism. And don't despair if you were not a Trump supporter and didn't vote for Trump. We don't think, based on history and our reading of what's going on, that everything is likely to fall apart in the short term just because he was elected president. So, those are a few things to just guide you along, hopefully, provide you with some perspective. And then some of the things we talked about we want to watch the expiration of the tax law that was passed in 2017, see how the cabinet looks, see how the tariff uh, pledge that he made or platform issue that he advanced during the campaign, how that plays out. And then I want to look a little bit at regulations to see what, if anything, is done on that. Not done, but a hint of what they might want to do. So, Brett, thanks for spending a few minutes with me. This was good stuff, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing what the end of the year and 2025 brings.
Yeah, I'll have you definitely back on the show. I mean, you're a regular now. You may even, have a coup and take over for me. But but good stuff. Listener, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. And you can check out the work that Brett and I do, the rest of the team, by going to our website, www.elliottwealth.com. Thanks for listening today. I'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial podcast very soon. Take care.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of Osaic Wealth, Inc., and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of information provided at these websites. Nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to or your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management Services, LLC, not affiliated with Osaic Wealth, Inc.